quickly after that. I want to bring in Mara Gillespie, who is a pollster, strategist and former Republican advisor as well. Thanks for joining us tonight. Are you surprised at the results we're seeing at the moment?
No, this election has always been the Republicans to lose. And it doesn't matter whether it was Biden or Kamala Harris, but I think in a large way, the inner circle, the inner sanctum of the Biden team really did put the Democrats, but also put the country in a bad position, because they knew that going into this election, people were unhappy with how things were at the current status. The current status quo was not, people were high gas prices, or gas prices were high, but grocery prices were high, housing costs are high, there isn't enough housing to go around, essentially. There's not houses on the market. So people were already upset, plus the safety and security aspects. And Republicans at large are viewed as better on those two areas. And those are the main issues that people were concerned about. And so it really was the Republicans to lose. And the only reason why it's this close and that we don't know the answer to it is because of the fact that Donald Trump is so polarizing. He is so toxic in many ways. And he failed to deliver on a peaceful transfer of power 4 years ago. So when people talk about how much better their life was 4 years ago, I'd also hearken them to remember that the people who were around him, his cabinet, the people who were his top advisors, they're no longer going to be there. And so unfortunately for us, we have a whole new band of people that could be with him should he win the White House tonight.
Just explain that last point to us, because I've heard this many times, that he won't have the so-called adult supervision, as some put it, that was there in the first Trump presidency, in the cabinet in particular. Who will be in Donald Trump's ear? Who will be most influential? Is it going to be some of the figures that we've seen, certainly through the campaign?
That's what he has said so far. He's already talked to reporters about wanting to put people like Vivek Ramaswamy and Tulsi Gabbard and others in his corner. I think, he's talked about having Elon Musk around, maybe as an advisor. He's interviewed more or less people like Kevin McCarthy to be his chief of staff. So really, it's concerning in a lot of ways that people think that, one, he is going to be able to do this job the way that he was able to do it in 2016, that he could possibly do it the same way now. But my hope is that with the Senate going to Republicans, and I'm hoping that the Senate Republicans elect John Thune to be their majority leader, I think he can steer the ship in a better direction. Again, I do think the Republicans are better equipped to handle things like getting the economy back on track, but I just don't see how we can completely ignore the fact that Donald Trump, the things that he says, the things that he does, it is embarrassing in a lot of ways.
I think
I'm not
that's
afraid
what,
to say that.
yeah,
I'm a Republican, but it's important to say it.
Yeah, and I think that's what, people can understand, I'm sure, that the economy is a big factor here, that people are struggling, and that's cost Kamala Harris support. But the point you're making there about how do people overlook or overcome denying the outcome of the last election, the felony conviction, the various other charges that he's facing, all the things that he says and so on. How do you explain why so many American voters tonight have overlooked that?
I think, again, largely when they got into the voting, but again, we still don't know the outcome, but I do think a lot of it has to do with, okay, well, I approve of the Republicans on policy, not necessarily Trump himself, but because they just are been so disappointed by what the Biden-Harris administration has done over the last 4 years, they went with change. They went with an option by ignoring who Trump is as a person and telling themselves, listen, if you're looking for a reason to justify an action is probably not the best action to take, you're going to find a reason to justify it. And I think that's what you're seeing play out right now, is that people are looking, and I'm not going to judge. Again, listen, we have a right to choose who we want to. You can vote for Republican, Democrat, Independent, or you can write in. It's our choice. But you also don't need to give your vote to somebody who doesn't deserve it. And I think that in a lot of ways, Republicans have overlooked so many things in kind of advancing the policy aspects that they hope to see play out, and instead of what the moral compass should have been. Yeah. And so I think that I think that's where a large part of it comes from. And I do think that in the years to come, there will be this reckoning where Republicans will say, oh, I didn't know he said that, or I wouldn't have supported him if I heard that. And you're going to hear a lot of excuses in the years to come. But right in this moment, they do know. And it's just easier to, right or wrong, it's just easier to go with what you think will be beneficial for you and your family as opposed to its long-term, because we don't know what Trump will do, to be honest.
Final question for you, Mara. J.D. Vance How do you think he went through the campaign as the running mate, and what's that relationship like at the end of this campaign, do you think?
It's got to be pretty interesting because of the fact that Trump went out of his way to say that the VP position doesn't matter. But then, J.D. Vance did such a great job during the VP debate with he and Tim Walz. And so I do think there are a lot of Republicans who are hopeful, and maybe they put their vote towards J.D. Vance as opposed to Donald Trump in hopes that, because again, we talked about earlier on the program that Donald Trump can only be president for these 4 years. And so the Republicans need to look for what the future of the party looks like. And maybe they're hoping that J.D. Vance can steer him, away from some of his more outlandish behaviors, like bringing in a Laura Loomer or other really dark fringes of the party into his orbit. And so maybe J.D. Vance can be a guiding light there for Donald Trump. But, I think that's got to be a little bit frayed given how he's spoken about him in the past.
We'll see. Mara Gillespie, thank you very much for joining us.